Hello, my name is Aliyah Rich.
Hello, my name is Justus Phillips.
Hi, my name is Rashaad Pitts.
Welcome to Empower Your Story Season 7.
A podcast from Rayground Training Center in Chicago.
This season, our theme is hobbies and life hacks.
My favorite life hack is playing video games because playing video games helps me make new friends.
Hey, it's Power Your Story Program Director Andrea Klunder, and I'm introducing this season's episodes because, well, a funny thing happened. We recorded Season 7 at the end of 2019, and then we were going to work on editing them for you in the spring of 2020, and yes, you already know what I'm going to say. A global pandemic happened and shut down our program for a while. Then we transitioned to online, which was great for recording new content, but harder for editing with everyone having different hardware and software, so we got behind schedule. But I'm happy to share these episodes with you now, and listening back, honestly, I think they are just as fresh now as they were when our student producers recorded them. But I'm probably biased. This episode is the first of 2 conversations with Chicago-based comic book stores. When we were looking for field trip ideas that semester, we couldn't decide which one to visit, so we went to both. In this conversation, Justus, Rashaad, and Aliyah talked with James Nurse, the founder and owner of First Aid Comics in the Hyde Park neighborhood near University of Chicago. I am relieved to say that First Aid has been weathering the COVID storm and is still open for business, though I'm sure some of their in-person gaming event schedules have been impacted by safety precautions. Now more than ever, it's important to support locally owned independent businesses. So if you find yourself in the Hyde Park area of Chicago, stop in. And if you're a comic book fan, you can always shop online at firstaidcomics.com. Enjoy the show.
My name is Justus Phillips. Welcome to Power Your Story. We are at First Aid Comics on 55th in Hyde Park, Chicago. I am here with
James Nurse.
Tell me what your role is here.
So my role here is I run the store along with our manager, Rihanna, and we sell comics to folks in the area.
Who started First Aid Comics and where was it founded?
So we started here in Hyde Park itself, and I started it, and we started it back in 2008.
Why is your store called First Aid?
Well, because my last name is Nurse, and a good friend of mine, she said, I got to have something clever, so she came up with the idea of doing a medical theme. So we came up with First Aid Comics. So we do the lab coats. I know you can't see me, but I'm wearing a white lab coat, and we do a lot of other medical things. Like our subscription club is prescriptions instead of subscriptions, that kind of thing.
That is amazing to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun things. When I first started, I did my business cards on tongue depressors and used to give out tongue depressors and stuff. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with it.
What was your inspire to work with comics?
I actually grew up in comics. I was not a very good reader, and my mother wanted me to read better. So she actually dragged me into my first comic shop and got me to read. And that was kind of my inspiration and what got me started.
Yeah, I'm kind of was in your position. I'm trying to read comics and all this type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I would really like to get into this more, study more of my history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Justus.
What do you love the most about comics?
What I love most about comics, I think, is that it marries the visual image with the written word, and that they mean different things. You know, like in a picture book, it's sometimes just describes the picture, whereas in comics, they actually are both telling a different story, and then the way you read those 2 different stories that are going on creates another answer or more to the story. That's what I like about them.
What event hosts here?
So the events that we host here, we do a lot of gaming events mostly. So we do Magic the Gathering, we do Yu-Gi-Oh!, and we have a Pokemon kids group. But one of our most popular events right now is Dungeons & Dragons, the role-playing game. And we have adults and kids groups that play here. And that's been really exciting because that's really been growing a lot lately. And then we also do events that are more comic related. So we have a local writer, Eve Ewing, has done some signings here before. So she'll come and she's writing some comics. She's writing Ironheart. And that's been a huge success for us. We've been really lucky that she's been willing to come and do a signing here. So those are some of the events.
When do free comic book events happen?
Free comic books, usually it's once a year, so it's always the first Saturday in May, and it's called Free Comic Book Day. And it can get kind of crazy in here, as you can well imagine. So we set up a whole wall of comics that we give away. People get to come in and we hand out comics. And last year we had a DJ, so we had music, and we also had some folks from Pocket Con. They run a show downtown, and they were here and they were helping folks make magnets, superhero magnets. So we have some other kinds of events that go on during that. It's a big, busy day. It's a lot of fun.
Why do you host gaming meetups?
So we have a lot of folks that live in the neighborhood, neighborhood folks, as well as, of course, the University of Chicago is here. So a lot of students and families from the university, and they like to play games. So that we create a space that people can come hang out and have fun. And it helps the store and it helps the folks in the neighborhood.
Do you play RPG games?
I used to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was in high school and younger, but I have not played in a long time. As much as I love it, the store keeps me so busy, I don't really have time to play right now.
Okay. So I have a few questions. Knowing that the comic book industry is always changing, knowing that nowadays there's comic books online, do you think that the comic book industry is dying as is itself?
It's actually a really interesting question because I would argue that actually there's more money and more interest in the comic book industry than ever before. When I was growing up, my mother would have never known who the Avengers were. I could have said that and she'd be like, what are you talking about? Now the Avengers, Captain America, and all the characters are household names. So I think really what digital is doing and the movies are doing is they're introducing a much larger customer base for them, but they just read differently than I did or traditionally reading the pamphlets. Instead, they're reading online or they're reading the collected versions or graphic novels. So it's just the store needs to learn how to adjust to the new way people are reading comics.
So do you think anybody got confused towards like any of the Avengers movie, especially towards how Thanos is in the movie versus how he is in the comics, or anything like towards like Spider-Man, I wouldn't say any spoilers for the movies, but you know how every movie for comic books, whether it's Spider-Man and Batman, is very different. Mm-hmm. And people might get confused about how the characters, how will you explain that?
I'm not sure that I can explain it, but definitely I think if we're talking specifically about Marvel, I think they tend to have, since it's often the comic writers that are involved in the movie scripts, they tend to be more true to the essence of the comics. They may play a little bit like one of the discussions is, Spider-Man, is it an organic web shooter? Like, does it just happen naturally? Or did he actually invent his web shooters and the fluid that creates his webs? And, I think it's very different stories there, depending on which one you choose. I think with DC, they tend, and this is an assumption on my part, but I assume that they have more movie writers and less of the comic writers involved. And so you tend to see bigger differences than what are in the comics. But the comics themselves have changed so much over the years that the movies being different isn't, if you're really into the comics, isn't that much of a shift usually. You're used to seeing some growth and evolution of the characters because you've been reading so long.
So I got first introduced to comic books and like comic book general is that I used to watch the Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire. Mm-hmm. So I saw the Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
And it took a while to just like understand the character and a bunch of other characters within the Marvel universe, as well as other characters like DC and like any other indie comics with like Spawn. So if somebody came in the store not knowing any comic book characters or seeing any Marvel movie or anything like that, how will you introduce them to comic books and how will you explain the whole thing to them?
That's a very good question. So the first thing I would ask them is what motivated them to come in. So if they hadn't seen any of the movies or hadn't read comics before, that I would assume that there was something else that motivated them to find out more. And I would ask, like, what kinds of books do they read? Do they like science fiction, or do they want to try superheroes? And depending on what that answer is, that'll help narrow it down. Because if they're wanting to try superheroes, I would always recommend start with one of the event books, because Marvel and DC want you to jump on and they will give you the information you need to keep reading forward. They're not going to require you to go back and try and find things. So if you read an event book, you'll get introduced to lots of characters and what's currently going on in the DC or the Marvel universe. And from there, you can kind of go, well, I really liked this character in this event. And then you can maybe pursue that character's book. So that's a really good way to start with superheroes. And then there's a lot of sci-fi books and stuff like that. So if that's kind of their answer, then you might narrow it down. What are your favorite, science fiction? Do you like Star Wars? Do you like Star Trek? What kind of science fiction? Like Outer Limits? Or do you like the old stuff? And from there, we might be able to find a book that might fit that.
So you ever get those sort of confusions towards like any story? Say, for instance, you pick up a Batman comic book, but you don't know what's going on. Who is this guy? What's been happening lately? Say, for instance, you pick up a Batman comic book, there's zombies everywhere. You have no idea what's going on. And lately it's been like a issue series where they having like a zombie event or attack or invasion. And how will you explain that to somebody who just randomly pick up something and just don't know what's going on?
Well, yeah, it's Deceased, I think is what you're talking about, is the new DC book. Yeah, it can be hard. So a lot of times now they'll give a little synopsis at the beginning of the book. So that's a good way to kind of catch you up to where you are in an issue. If we have, the first issue, we'll take them to that and show them that. Also, if you really want to know about a character and you want to know all the history, Wikipedia, believe it or not, is a really good tool to look up characters. I don't know what it is about Wikipedia, but comic fans apparently love it because it always has a ton of really good information to find out about what's going on with a story or a character.
I won't lie. I use Wikipedia a lot. Yeah, because if anybody I don't know, I just Google it. Anybody I never heard of, Google it.
Yep.
Anybody I just want to know about, Google it. But I would say about your job, what is the best part and what is the worst part when working in a comic book store?
So the best part is probably getting to meet people and getting to talk about the things that I love. It's much easier to sell something if you like it. It's much harder to sell something that you don't care about. So I love that. I love working with the product. I love working with the people. The part that I don't like is paying the bills.
Yeah, it's understandable. Okay, yeah, I would say it's been a pleasure working with you.
Nice meeting you too.
Anybody who's like new to comic books, that it's okay if you don't know everything. And it's best if you can just explore whatever you can find and just visit your local comic book store and check it out.
That sounds great. I like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Power Your Story podcast was produced by students at Ray Graham Training Center High School in Chicago with the support of after school mentors.
Our advisors are Miss Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creator Impostor Studios.
We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube at Power Your Story Podcast.
Our website is poweryourstorypodcast.com.
Thank you for listening.
And be true to yourself.